Get the cash flow you need with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Pay expenses, make upgrades, perform maintenance, and more with interest-free and low-interest financing. Visit ccga.ca. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advance Payments Program.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Hey, hope you had yourself a great weekend. A bunch of different kind of weather across the country. I know everybody wasn't probably able to get some of the combining done they wanted to get done in some of the parts. But if you were able to get some bushels into that hopper, hopefully you're getting the yield that you're striving for. Quite a bit of variability. We're going to be talking about some of that variability with Peter Repeat Johnson here today on the program. We've also got a product spotlight with Genesis Fertilizer. And we're also going to hear from Dr. Joy Agnew out of Olds College talking about technology readiness versus readiness for technology. So we'll get some thoughts from her today from that Ag Smart event that happened in Olds earlier this month. If you have any feedback on today's program, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. You know, we talked about this on Friday's show, but what is happening here with this potential rail strike that is coming to fruition August 22nd? So that is this week, everybody. We've got the labor minister who has denied binding arbitration. We've got railways locking out employees as of August 22nd. We've got products already over the past number of weeks stopped being transported, and hydrous ammonia being one of them. That's a product that in Western Canada can be very high demand here. It needs to be on the ground in place for the fall. We've got situations where container company Maersk, the shipping company, they're no longer taking orders for Canada because of this strike. They don't want. See, what happens is it's not like a hose where, you know what, you just turn the water off and it's like, okay, strike's happening. Let's move that valve. Nothing's moving through. Up until you move that valve on that water pipe, it's at full throttle, right? That water's flowing just as it normally would. What we're doing is we're moving that valve ever so slowly, choking off the supply chain in and out of the country of Canada. And you know what happens when, let's just say there is a strike, say it's a 3-day strike, say it's a 2-week strike, and we come to our senses and somehow we find some sort of resolution and conclusion of this. When we open that valve back up, that's been shut off, holding all of that flow back, it's going to creep open. It's going to take a while. We heard last week from Karen Proud, President and CEO of Fertilizer Canada, we heard that for every day of strike, it's 4 to 5 days to get back started up. So if we have a 10-day strike, we're talking about over a month to get our system, that pump, prime back up and back online. See, we just can't turn that valve and the flow begins again. No, not how it works, everybody. So we're talking about fertilizer movement. We're talking about grain movement. We're talking about autos leaving the country from the auto sector. We're talking about energy, right? Those tankers filled with energy. We're talking about those too. We're talking about lumber. We're talking about goods coming into the country, things that have been purchased and are being imported because Canadians desire them. Maybe they can't get them here. It's how we have trade agreements all around the world. There's a lot of stuff that moves by rail. $1 billion worth of goods a day is transported by rail. the best way for this to not cause any sort of a disruption, and one would argue the system is already being disrupted. I think it's a fact. We've been hearing about this for a couple of weeks now. Prevent the strike from happening. Then we don't got to worry about how long it takes to turn that valve back up, because we can't just turn it open. It's a very slow process. So there already has been a disruption. We're going to see it in some of our economic numbers. And Canadians have been so worried about inflation. All we've heard about is how things cost so much more. Things are, this has been a problem for medium or the middle class of Canada, right? People on the, having trouble making ends meet. Well, if you think that this strike isn't going to have an impact on what prices are that regular Canadians are paying for goods, boy, you are mistaken. We have to find a resolution. We've heard from numerous farm groups, binding arbitration is the answer. There are a number of things that are issues. A lot has been said about how this isn't about money. Money is a component. Heard from CN Rail yesterday that a conductor makes about $121,000 without benefits, works about 160 days a year. There's issues here around days off and scheduling and components of there's some safety aspects to it that are being pushed by the union. Whatever those gaps are, and they continue to be described as very far apart, we need a solution. Canada needs a solution to this. We need both sides to come together here this week before there is a full lockout and no trains are moving. Send me your feedback on that. Haney at RealAgriculture.com. Let's take a break. When we come back, we've got Dr. Joy Agnew of Olds College with us right after this.
At Vaterstad, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Vaterstad, we look forward to growing together.
Now time for a product spotlight. We're joined by Bryce Geisel, Canada Senior Agronomist with Koch Agronomic Services. What should farmers keep in mind about protecting their nitrogen this fall?
Fall applied nitrogen is still at risk for losses by volatilization, denitrification, and leaching before and after winter sets in. So utilizing a proper inhibitor with a high rate of active ingredient can help keep that nitrogen around until spring. With a fall nitrogen application, we need to protect it not only until the soil freezes, but try to prevent losses after the snow melts in the spring as well.
So how do the products that Koch Agronomic Services measure up in active ingredients?
So Super U is the standard for dual inhibitors and has been proven over and over again by researchers. For any of those farms out there that may be using fall anhydrous ammonia, Centuro contains a new nitrification inhibitor that allows that application start before the soil cools enough to stop those microbes responsible for the nitrification of ammonia. And Anvil is a proven product to help reduce volatilization losses for farmers using operational efficiency of broadcast urea this fall. You can learn more about the products and find comparisons at defendyourend.ca.
The answer to all your above-the-ground nitrogen loss problems is Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Anvil's dual active ingredients deliver extended protection, visit kochag.ca. Well, recently at the Ag Smart event at Olds College here in August, Chase Chambers from RealAgriculture had a chance to catch up with Olds College's Dr. Joy Agnew. Now, this is a very fascinating conversation, talking about technology readiness versus readiness for technology. Let's hear what Dr. Agnew had to say.
Welcome back to Real Agriculture. My name is Chase Chambers. Today I'm with Joy Agnew of Olds College, and we're going to be talking about technology readiness and readiness for technology. How's it going today?
It's going great. It's the start of another Ag Smart, and I can't wait.
Awesome. So first, can you just explain the meaning behind tech readiness and readiness for technology, or the gap between the adoption?
Yeah, so for the last 6 years, and actually even beyond that, we've been working on, advancing technologies, and we have this pretty robust innovation ecosystem to develop all kinds of tools and systems and solutions for farming, and yet adoption doesn't seem to be addressed nearly as much. And so this presentation really covered or talked about that difference between technology readiness and the human factors associated with readiness for technology, and honestly readiness for change. And that needs to be addressed and considered going forward to really accelerate the adoption of technologies and allow us to harness the potential value in the technologies that are becoming available to us. So adoption is important so that we are taking full advantage of the tools that we have available to us with the advancement of things like artificial intelligence and robotics and big data and data systems. And we need that robust adoption to improve overall productivity and sustainability of food production. Without that, if we're going to have typical adoption rate trends or timeframes of 30 to 40 years, there's no way we're going to be able to keep up with the advancement of technology, which is growing at an exponential rate and driving all kinds of potential value to farms. But without bridging that gap between technology readiness and readiness for technology, we won't be able to do that.
Will any incentives have you seen? Have they increase this readiness or not really?
The example that I know, it doesn't appear to have made a difference, and so that's the other thing that really needs to be better understood and better assessed is we might understand the barriers to adoption, but we really don't know the impact that addressing those barriers will really have on adoption. So looking at historical examples like adoption of conservation tillage, it took 30 years to reach a 30 or an 80% adoption rate, and there's points in time that incentives and different programs were launched, and it didn't appear to have any impact on the adoption rate at all. So if we want to accelerate adoption and if we want to make sure that the right practices are being adopted, what do we have to do differently? And I really think it's more than just understanding barriers to adoption. It's understanding the human nature and human aspects of change and adoption and being ready for making a step change. And that's a whole world of social science that I don't think has been explored nearly enough in the ag space.
Right. So then what are some of the missing pieces from Canada's adoption ecosystem?
We're missing a lot of pieces on the adoption side. We're actually even still missing some pieces on the innovation side, but we definitely need to start thinking about the adoption ecosystem. For one, if adoption rates are going to be our key metric that we're measuring against, we need to better assess adoption rates and understand the baseline of where we currently are with adoption of different technologies and practices. We also need just better understanding of that human nature and the human element of change and adoption and readiness for technology. And then we need to come together with the various entities and stakeholders to develop an ecosystem and programs and supports and resources to address this adoption ecosystem gap.
Awesome. And is there ways where someone can know if a technology is ready for their operation or if an operation is ready to adopt this technology?
That's a great question. I think that's something that would need to be addressed within the adoption ecosystem. I know from chatting with some international entities and international programs, they have addressed this connection with farmers, and they do things like technology audits on their farm, so that, because every farm is different, every farm is going to need sort of a different suite of solutions. So they need somebody to help them assess what's going to work best for them and what they're ready for, and then help them get access to the training and supports that they need to really take full advantage of that. That's not happening in Canada. It's happening in places like the UK, and Australia is doing some really incredible work on the social science side, but Canada needs to learn from that and catch up.
Awesome. So how important is it then for Canadians, but everyone, to budget the time to learn the new technology, not just the money to afford new technology?
Yeah, it's another great question. And how important is the learning about a technology in the adoption time frame acceleration, right? Because there's so many different variables, there's so many different factors related to adoption. I can't answer that question. I don't know which one is most important or how we bring all those pieces together to make an impact on adoption. But I do know that if we continue to rely on that human nature trend of being slow and steady and linearly responsive, there's no way we'll be able to really harness the value and potential in digital tools, AI, and other technologies that are now currently becoming available.
Awesome. So what are some final takeaways for farmers here?
We are doing some incredible things in the ag tech space. The advancement of technologies is exponential. There's so many tremendous opportunities in harnessing that power, and it would all be for supporting decision making on farm and improving productivity and sustainability. So we need to talk about that other side of it, talk about the adoption, generate the information and programs that we need to support that, and we'll really be able to harness the value of tech.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That was Real Agriculture's Chase Chambers talking to Dr. Joy Agnew of Olds College at the Ag Smart event earlier this month. So technology readiness versus readiness for technology. And Dr. Agnew makes some great points there in terms of, there's a lot of attention paid to the barriers around a technology adoption, complexity, upfront costs are a few. Return on investment is another key one when it comes to the barriers in terms of adoption of technology. But, okay, what do you actually do? What do we actually do to really, truly help people adopt that technology? Because I think a lot of times we measure adoption, in my mind, based on was that purchase made? Okay, so let's think about it from a software perspective. Or maybe it's like precision ag, right? You're gonna get into data. Everyone's talking about big data, and you realize, hey, if we're gonna be the farm of the future, we got to be into data. And so we pimp out all our machines with all this cool tech, and it does fantastic stuff. And then we collect all this data. We're an adopter, but we really haven't moved to that next level of adoption, which is actually using some of that data to make decisions for the future in terms of improving our farm. We see it a lot of times with software, right? Everybody thinks, well, if I just get this piece of software, all my problems are going to be solved. But it's the implementation and the true adoption of the features of that technology that really allow you to take that next step and prove the point, hey, this is why I bought it in the first place. Just having it is not necessarily the full step that you should be taking. And I do question sometimes how we measure adoption, but how we get people to adopt new stuff, we really have to improve the way that we communicate some of the benefits. And hey, listen, there's a lot of products out there that are new and they sound great, but they have not done a good job marketing in terms of this is why you should buy this product. Besides, hey, it's flashy, it's cool, and it's pretty bloody awesome. And hey, it does sound pretty awesome, but at the end of the day, it's farmers are saying it's got to provide a return on investment on my farm. Now, to be fair, for a lot of the companies that are trying to market to farmers, if you ask the farmers, hey, what kind of return are you looking for? You're probably not going to get a very straight answer. So that what return on investment is important to the farmer in order for that technology to be adopted, that's a bit of a moving target. A lot of times in crop production, it's measured in bushels. Yeah, it gives you a 2 bushel advantage, gives you a 5 bushel advantage. This is going to lead to 10 bushel advantage, whatever it is. That's a lot of times how things are communicated. But there's a lot of work to be done in this area. One thing we know, just providing financial incentives, hey, here is half the cost subsidized for this technology, is not necessarily leading to higher levels of adoption over the long period of time, right? The long time horizon that farming is. Just adopting something in a 1 year based on a payment is not necessarily moving the needle long term. But interesting thoughts there from Dr. Agnew for sure. And Chase Chambers did a great job covering all the things that happened at AgSmart this year. You can find all of that great coverage at RealAgriculture.com. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, we've got a product spotlight with Genesis Fertilizer. We'll be right back right after this.
FP Genetics relentlessly brings innovative new seed genetics to Canadian farms, ensuring growers, breeders, and farmers are supported and viable. Being a valued partner on your farm for decades, you can expect the continuous pursuit of the best genetics. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's hybrid fall rye varieties and their end uses, or contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your fall seed strategy specific to your region.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. enhanced weed control, and a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at optimumglide.ca.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School, brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a park spotlight with Genesis Fertilizer. We're joined right now by Terry Drabiuk from Genesis Fertilizer. Hey, Terry, how's it going?
Excellent, Shaun. How are you?
Good. Hey, what do you do at Genesis Fertilizer?
I wear several hats. My title is Vice President of Business Development, but I also sit on the board of directors, and I'm also an exempt market dealing representative. So I'm registered and licensed to sell securities, and I look after a team of people who do the same thing.
Cool. Now, we've been talking about Genesis for a while here on RealAg Radio, but maybe there's some people that are listening to this show that have never heard of Genesis Fertilizer before. What is Genesis Fertilizer? Yeah,
it's an initiative to build a nitrogen plant with farmers. So our target is to get 75% of the plant owned by farmers and 25% from a strategic investor.
Okay. And when is the intended plant, the construction and all that to be completed and be online?
Yeah, so we're out raising money from farmers, and we have a financial advisor that's in place, but we have yet to announce it. It's a top tier international company. The target right now is to hit what they call the final investment decision sometime in late 2025 and shovel in the ground either late 2025 or 2026.
It's a big project, and it's something that I know a lot of farmers are very interested in. And there's, with where we see fertilizer prices at right now and supply and all the challenges, I think there's a lot of farmers looking at this as a very interesting from an operational standpoint for their operations, but also as an investment as well. For a project of this size, you've got to have some real major partners that you're working with to kind of put all this together. Do you want to shed some light on that?
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of people and a lot of corporations that we're dealing with, from support to technologies to construction to, government and peripheral organizations like the railways and most importantly, the farmers themselves. But when it comes to support, the company who is actually raising the money is a company called Access Capital. And Access Capital is an exempt market dealer who's registered in the provinces where we sell securities. So we have to follow securities laws. Osler, who is our legal firm out of Calgary, they specialize in securities, and they've been with us from the start. And we have selected a financial advisor. They're top tier. We're hoping to make that announcement anytime, like possibly even this week. And then, our accounting firm is KPMG that audits our books, and M&P does all of our business modeling. Stantec is our owner's engineers, and they've been with us from the beginning. We went out and signed technology agreements, and we made those announcements already with ThyssenKrupp. ThyssenKrupp has built more ammonia plants than anybody else in the world. In fact, they're the ones who built Sasfraco, which is now Yara at Belle Plaine. Doing the urea synthesis is Stamicarbon, and they're also the ones who did the urea synthesis at Belle Plaine. And then we partnered with a company called Carbon Co. In Carbon Co, with the green blue ammonia environment, they have a technology that sequesters carbon. So our focus is on a blue ammonia, green urea, low carbon footprint plant, and in fact one of the first and only one of them in the world. So and we've signed agreements with our construction firms. We've actually got meetings with them all this week here in Saskatchewan. With the government and with them on site. They're an international, every big name company. We haven't announced yet. And we've also selected at our local construction firm, who everybody will know as well. We've had great partnership with the government of Saskatchewan. We've got a series of meetings this week with them again, and that also goes right down to the crowns. The utilities like Sask Power, Sask Water Security, Transgas, Department of Highways, Sask Power, Sask Energy, they've all been really good. They've got the Saskatchewan government's got a really good, framework on dealing with projects of our size and bringing business to Saskatchewan. So it's been good. And then, there's people like yourselves who, we've partnered with to get the message out. And we've partnered with Rob Sake and his AgVisor Pro platform, and he amplifies some of our message as well. And I guess ultimately, Shaun, we can't do this without farmers. That's really the big one.
Yeah. Terry, if somebody wants more information about the Genesis project, where do they go? They may be interested in, hey, I'd be willing to, or I'm interested in investing some money here. This sounds like something that I should be putting some money to work that's off farm, so to speak, diversifying my investment portfolio, and it has a benefit to my farming operation as well. How do you suggest they do that?
Well, our website's pretty robust. They can go to genesisfertilizers.com, and there's all the contact information is on there. You can contact any one of the board members. You can contact myself, and there's a link to both our phone numbers and our email addresses for everybody who sits on the board and is in senior management.
Great stuff. Hey, Terry, thanks so much for joining us here today for this product spotlight.
Okay, thanks, Shaun. Yeah, have a great day.
Yeah. Hey, make sure everybody you check out the website, genesisfertilizer.com. Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio. Peter Pete Johnson will be with us right after this.
Apply anhydrous ammonia and protect your application earlier than normal this fall. Defend against potential losses and protect your bottom line with Centuro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Patented active ingredient Pronitridine offers agronomically effective protection where it matters most, below ground. Easy to handle Centuro is also non-corrosive for fewer worries about downtime or equipment damage. Start early with Centuro as part of your nitrogen management plan. Contact your local retailer or visit centuro.ca for more information today. Doing more in the field is possible when you add the proven power of Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, the next generation dual-active urease inhibitor from Koch Agronomic Services. Driven by Duramide technology, Anvil gives growers the advantages of low application rate and long-lasting protection, all thanks to Duramide, a Koch-patented active ingredient. Defend against volatilization, boost efficiency, accomplish more. Learn all about the dual-active power of Anvil by visiting anvil.ca. That's ANVOL.ca.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. This segment's brought to you by FP Genetics Hybrid Fall Rye, innovative seed genetics for Canadian farmers. Contact your local FP territory manager to discuss your fall seed strategy and discover Hybrid Fall Rye's flexible and uses for marketing, milling, distilling, ethanol, and feed. Visit hybridfallrye.ca today. Joining me right now is Peter Pete Johnson. Hey, Pete, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going well, Shaun, but we could use some sunshine. I'm getting tired of the cloud and tired of all the stinking rain, man. We had another wet weekend here. It almost acts like fall weather because you'd get sun and then you'd get a downpour and sun and a downpour. And the people that didn't just get any sun, they maybe got a tornado. So things have been less than ideal weather-wise for much of southwestern Ontario.
Yeah, you know what? Here's what I noticed on the weekend is that during the day, beautiful weather during the day. Sun's out, it's hot, it's we still got some summer to go, but I'll tell you in the mornings, it's a little fallish. Feels a little fall. It's cool. Like it takes a while for the day to kind of get rolling from a heat perspective. So you can already feel it, which is, man, it's the middle of August. Come on, give us more time. Give us more time, yeah. Mother Nature.
Well, and what's really interesting is a lot of people are noticing that not only does it feel fallish, a lot of the plants are acting like it's already fall. So there are trees dropping leaves that shouldn't be dropping leaves. Not normally for another couple of weeks, yeah. And turning, and it's acting like it's closer to fall than we want it to be, Shaun.
Yeah, and if this past weekend there were some combines rolling. depending on where you were and if the weather cooperated. It's I I had somebody from the U.S. ask me on Friday, hey, how are the yields in Canada? I just it's a mixed bag. It really depends on where you are. That goes locally, just around me. But if you consider the whole country, we got a whole bunch of a lot of different things.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Western Canada, there's areas that have had excellent moisture, but then got so much heat, right?
Yep.
And talked about that with Doug Moisey a little bit last week on the Agronomists. Doug was late to the table; he didn't make it on time, but just he talked really about cool stuff with canola and heat blast in canola, and there's some Twitter stuff going around about optimum temperatures as well. And I think one of the things that a lot of growers don't realize is that the optimum temperature right at pollination is typically 5 degrees or sometimes maybe 8 degrees less than the optimum temperature for growth and grain fill. So right at pollination, if you get heat, things really can fall apart pretty significantly. And so oat blast or blast in oats, abortion in canola, even here in Ontario, we are seeing some really weird pollination stuff. I was out scouting edible beans on Friday, and man, I cannot explain why, but in those edible beans, we would look at pods that had 8 beans in a pod, but only 3 were actually developing. And they all pollinated. They all had that little seed there that at least the embryo was there. Maybe I'm pretty sure it pollinated, but it just hasn't developed. So as Dave Hooker would say, they're parthenocarpic. They maybe didn't pollinate well enough, or they didn't do double pollination, and so they aren't developing. Sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 7, sometimes all 8 are pollinating or are developing. But in the corn crop as well, particularly in the areas where we got too much moisture, it's not that water sat in a lot of those fields, but when I walk into them, the corn crop, it just doesn't look robust. The stalks don't have the diameter that they did last year. And stalk diameter is a real indicator of yield. And when I'm looking at pollination, tip back, not fully pollinated to the tip, or talking with my good friend Al McCollum in Elgin County, he says they have a lot where the butt of the cob did not pollinate. And so you look at that and you go, wow, what's going on here? And yet I talk to growers further north where they didn't get that excess moisture. They're actually crying for moisture. They want more rainfall. And they're talking about just 18 rows around and 45 kernels long. And if you get any kernel weight there at all, that's 300 bushel corn, Shaun. So when you say variability, there is big variability out there.
Well, and use canola as the example. We want less heat during that pollination time, that flowering time. But heat, that's typically the time of the summer where we have some of the hottest temperatures. But this is why, so strategy comes into it. This is why we saw so many farmers over the past number of years trying to move their canola earlier from a seeding perspective. But there's trade-offs, right? Because we're a little bit slower out of the ground. The soil's cool. We're not as even of emergence. That's a whole problem in itself. But then the flea beetles come in, they attack. We're not warm enough to kind of grow through that stage of the plant cycle, and we keep on getting attacked by the flea beetles. So people started moving their seeding date back to where originally was, and now we're dealing with the heat again. So it's a real window we're trying to get through here. Sometimes someone would say square peg round hole, but we do pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's never just one factor, right, Shaun? So, I mean, how many times has Wheat Pete talked with you about, dormant seeding of wheat, or get out there when the soil temperature is 1 degree Celsius? Like, do not wait. Why does that work with wheat most of the time? It's because, again, we move that pollination date forward, cooler temperatures. Wheat likes it at 20 degrees Celsius or 68 Fahrenheit. That's where it pollinates the best. And so if you pollinate in the heat of the summer, it's not going to pollinate nearly as well. So with wheat, fortunately, we don't have to worry about flea beetle. With canola, we get this added factor of flea beetle decimating the stand. So it's a trade-off. You got to have plants there if you're going to get yield. I mean, you got to have plants to pollinate. So if flea beetle wipes you out, that doesn't work. So then you move your planting date and you take risk on heat. And this year in Western Canada, that has been probably a tough choice because there's been lots of heat during pollination.
We had so much crop out there. We like, if you look across the broad production area of Western Canada, boy, we had a crop. And the heat's going to rob us of it, and the lack of precipitation through that hot period to kind of cool things off. There's crop, and it's created more variability in some of the yield outcomes for sure. And I guess what's kind of concerning, I don't want to, we've had different farmers on the Farm Rapid Fire the past number of weeks, and we've got some people saying, yeah, we're in pretty good shape. We've got some people saying, I'm going to be really disappointed, I think, where things work. But if you use Twitter as a bit of a guide, which is dangerous, some of the early harvested crops here, people have been pretty disappointed with. I don't know how that speaks for what the yields will be like when we get to the back end, the later seeded stuff. That's what has me a little bit concerned. So I don't know where to put it, above average, average, below average. I really don't know. It'd be stupid for me to say. I am a little bit concerned about some of that back end stuff, though.
Yeah, and I think the greatest yield robber from a wheat perspective typically is heat. And I mean, you got to have moisture, but this year you had moisture, but heat just takes cereal. It doesn't matter if it's oats, barley, wheat, canola as well. On the other hand, your corn yields, Shaun, if you had the moisture and you had heat, your corn and soybean yields should be right through the roof. And I talked with Paul Sullivan this morning, great agronomist in Eastern Ontario. He says their soybean crop right now just looks like it's going to blow the doors off because they've had heat, they've had moisture, and for the most part, they've managed to stay on top of white mold, which is, of course, is a big issue for them out there. But yeah, it's going to be variable. I look at our edible bean crop and our corn crop in this part of the world, and I just say, yeah, I think a lot of growers are going to go to the field and expect 240 bushel corn, and if they break 200, they might be doing well. I hope I'm wrong, but that's just my sense.
Right. Did you see that we've got a new soybean? So I think did we not break the soybean record?
Oh, it could be. I missed it if we did, but that's a possibility.
I'll look it up. I'll look it up during the commercial break. I'm
positive
that somebody shared that with me last week. I'll have to look at it during the commercial break. You know what? Speaking of that, let's take a break, Pete. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you about some of the protein levels in Western Canada, what we should expect in that spring wheat. People are talking about take the under. We'll talk about why. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School, brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
And we are back here on RealAg Radio. This segment is brought to you by Maizex. Field by field, Maizex is bringing Canadian seed to farmers across the country. Maizex is your source for high-performing soybeans and grain silage and grazing corn hybrids. Visit Maizex.com to find your local Maizex representative. That is MAIZEX.com. Maizex. Check them out. Okay, we are joined right now by Pete Johnson. And Pete, my memory is not great, but you know what? sometimes I'm correct. There was something in the bank here, but I had seen a link, and we found it during the commercial break. What's that soybean record?
Yeah, unbelievable. So I missed this one, and bad on me. I guess I got to pay more attention to the soybean news. 218.3 bushels per acre. Alex Harrell out of South Georgia on August the 13th. Like that, Shaun, I don't know. My corn yield won't be that high. So how you get soybeans at 218, that is incredible. Kudos to Alex for doing that. We're going to have to track down. What's really interesting is that Horst Bonner has been talking a little bit about these high yield soybeans, and he is quite convinced that in order to break 100 bushel per acre soybeans, you must add nitrogen to the crop. That the crop just physically isn't capable of fixing enough nitrogen or robbing enough nitrogen out of the soil that you get. In fact, he would say once you get much past 70 or 80 bushels per acre, you have to start adding nitrogen. And all these high yield guys are adding nitrogen. For those of us back in the more realistic 60 bushel yield category, adding nitrogen almost never pays. But yeah, high yield soybeans, there just gets to be a limit to what they can do from a nitrogen standpoint, and it's going to be an interesting discussion on managing them moving forward.
Yeah, and before I get all the text messages and emails for all the Debbie Downers out there, are some of the things that Alex did practical on a large scale? Probably not. I always look at these contests as a way to stretch our imaginations and show how what the genetic potential is of these crops, what we aspire to. Of course, we have to do things that are practical, and that at the end of the day, it has to have an ROI, and the bottom line is important. No kidding. But that's not the point of this exercise. The point is, what if? What are the things that we could do where maybe it's not about an average national yield of 218? I don't think it is. What if it was 80? Right? These are kind of the fun sort of things that we can discuss when we have these sorts of yield stretching exercises.
Yeah, and the other thing I think you have to keep in mind, Shaun, is that the soil that he's on and the water he has available makes a huge impact on how high he can get. I could do everything that he did on my farm at Lucan, and I will guarantee that I'm not going to break 100 bushel soybeans because my soil just has limitations. I shouldn't say guarantee I won't break 100, but I would fall over backwards if I actually did, right? Like the chances are just so slim. I've grown 78 bushel soybeans before, but we get into soil limitations. And when you look at it's interesting how the high yield growers are often always the high yield growers. And it comes back to that particular piece of dirt. My mind goes back to one of the record wheat growers in the UK. And his comment was, if I want to grow record wheat, I have to put it on my high elevation field because my high elevation field doesn't get the high temperatures that ruin the yields on my lower elevation fields. And so he knows that's his highest yield potential because of location and soil type plays and soil depth plays and, so many other factors that come into play from that perspective. But you're right. It's cool, and it makes us think outside the box. And that's what it's all about. As an agronomist, man, I am looking for the next way to get another 1 bushel, 2 bushel, 3 bushel. I don't think I'm going to add 100 bushel of soybeans to anybody, but if I can add 2, 3, 4, 5, I've done my job.
In terms of limits of the soil, is there anything else? So we got elevation. That's one. Water holding capacity. Like, quickly give us some of those Like, what are those characteristics that potentially have limits? Like, because just being too general. Like, well, good soil, bad soil. Get into the little bit of the granular here.
Oh, sure. So organic matter is one thing to look at. Soil type is one thing to look at. If you are dealing with a heavy clay soil, just the inherent nature of heavy clay soils, University of Guelph did some really cool work long ago where they looked at corn root growth, and they took a heavy Haldeman clay and grew corn in that environment, and they took a beautiful silt loam from the Elora Research Station, and it didn't matter what they did on that heavy clay soil, the corn plant would not grow as many roots. The soil itself, just the soil type, impeded root growth. So you have water holding capacity, you have depth of topsoil that plays into both nutrient cycling, and by the way, big crops beget big crops. If you have a field that grows really big yields, it often continues to do that. And you say, why is that? Well, part of it is that as you return the residue from a big crop to the soil, most of that carbon cycles. We talk about building organic matter, but the vast majority, at least 80%, maybe 90% of that carbon just breaks down. And when it breaks down, it releases nutrients to the next growing crop. And so if you have a big crop, it releases way more nutrients to the next crop to let that next crop be really big again. So there's depth of topsoil, there's drainage, there's soil type, there's organic matter, there's background fertility or base fertility, we call it. If you have low base fertility, you leave 10 bushels of corn, 13 bushels of wheat, and 5 bushels of soybeans on the table. And all of these guys that win high yield contests have through the roof base fertility. And the average producer can't afford through the roof base fertility, and environmentally it's not a good thing either, but you have to have medium base fertility or you're just leaving yield on the table. So a whole bunch of factors, Shaun, including elevation and just your geographic location. What's your latitude? Because if you're at low latitudes, it's always too hot.
Yeah, but interesting. I appreciate that. Okay. Let's talk about protein levels, Western Canadian wheat. We heard from Chip Flory, host of AgriTalk, on last week's show, talking about how North Dakota had some good yields when it came to spring wheat, but disappointment when it came to some of the protein level numbers. We had Corey Leeson from Radisson, Saskatchewan on the show last Thursday. He expects that protein levels will be low. He alluded to the fact that, hey, we're off to a good start, but we had a lot of moisture early on. And even though the last month has been really dry and hot, that moisture early on will have some sort of an impact. So what's your thoughts? What are some of the impacts or some of the variables here that would impact a lower protein level?
It's all about dilution, Shaun. And so when you apply nitrogen based on a 60 bushel wheat crop or an 80 bushel wheat crop, and that 80 bushel wheat crop, you're expecting to get 13.5 protein. Well, if you get very good yields, so now I don't get 80, now I get 90 or 95 or even better, 100 bushel per acre wheat crop, but I didn't add any more nitrogen, and it's just a dilution factor. We have the same amount of nitrogen, more of it goes to yield. If more of it goes to yield, less of it goes to protein. Protein is 1/6 nitrogen, and if you want to build protein as well as yield, it takes more nitrogen to build that protein. That's why on a high yield year, we often talk about this post-anthesis, 30 pounds of nitrogen. It's going to be a low protein year. There's going to be value in protein. So we make that second or third application of nitrogen after pollination, because then most of that goes to protein. In terms of the Saskatchewan situation, if your yield suddenly gets dumped because of high temperatures through pollination and grain fill, then it will depend on how much of that nitrogen you used to build the big biomass in the crop. Because if you build big biomass and you use most of that nitrogen setting up for the 100 bushel wheat crop, and then heat takes you out, well, you'll still get better protein because your yields aren't stellar, but you won't get the 14.5 protein that you would expect at a 60 bushel yield because a lot of it got tied up in the biomass And that eventually that'll become available down the line to another crop. We just don't know when it becomes available. And the last factor, of course, is if you're too wet. So we go to the Red River Valley in Manitoba, where they had excess moisture in the spring and it struggled to get the crop in, got it in, too wet. Then we get denitrification of some of that nitrogen that we applied. So then that's just a total 100% loss. That's happened in Ontario in the corn crop. The amount of nitrogen deficiency I am seeing in cornfields, and wheat Pete's bad. He went to an all upfront nitrogen program the last 2 years. Last year
really?
was the big win. This is on corn, not on wheat. Okay, on corn. Last year it won big time. This year wheat Pete has nitrogen deficiency in his corn crop that he wishes he didn't have, and he's not alone. There's a lot of it out there, and that's from denitrification and excess moisture.
Okay. So you would bet lower protein then for this year?
So certainly in high yield areas it's going to be low protein. In wet areas it's going to be low protein. In the areas that are like, it won't all be low protein.
Yeah.
But yeah,
mixed bag.
On average it's going to be lower. Yes.
Those are some of the factors. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Hey, we were going to talk about cover crop strategies to boost yield. You've been getting some questions from people about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it comes out of the programs that we are, the Climate Action Fund programs that are currently out there. And one of the requirements of that is to get cover crop funding, then you have to let that cover crop survive the winter. You can't kill it in the fall. Man, if you want a recipe for disaster, you let the cover crop live through the winter. And the challenge always is that a living crop in the spring, and then we try to kill it and create a seed bed. There's two things that can happen. One is that we get this big amount of biomass, and that big amount of biomass lays down over the winter, and now we have this insulating blanket on the soil surface in the spring, and nothing dries out. So we have nothing but mud to deal with. But even if we don't get that big biomass in the spring, if we have a reasonable biomass in the spring and we get a mild winter like last winter, where we had spring wheat survive the winter, we had oats survive the winter, we had barley survive the winter, maybe not in Western Canada, but certainly across Eastern Canada, right out into New Brunswick, which, pretty harsh environment most of the time, those live roots, they are real, the root ball is just really hard to work with to try to create a seed bed. And you can slice through that root ball and you can drop the seed in there. But when you try to close the slot and get that really important good seed to soil contact, those nice fine aggregates, those roots are cut open and they just don't go back together again. And so it's just a real challenge agronomically. As much as I like living roots in the spring from a soil health, from an erosion standpoint, from a grow a good crop, you kill it in the fall and then you don't touch it till spring and you don't leave big biomass. Big biomass is big problems.
But a part of an incentive, why, like, we should be agronomically sound in some of these programs. Why? Like, where's the gap there?
Do you want me to hit my head against the wall now, Shaun, or later? Because I've suggested that I am not in favor of some of the parameters of some of the programs. I don't understand exactly why. I can't answer that question. I'm an agronomist. I will always make good agronomic recommendations first, and we will try to figure out if we can utilize programs second. So, right. Cover crops and that program gets really tough to put together.
But we're lacking data to where consistently cover crops lead to higher yields, right?
So there is long-term, and we actually was on an agronomist back in maybe late June, and Inderjot Chahal was on with that, and she's part of Laura Van Erd's program at Ridgetown Campus, University of Guelph. And so in that situation, after about 8 years, and they had cover crops 6 out of 8 years. So most farmers can't do 6 out of 8 years. They're in a vegetable crop production system. And so after the vegetables sometimes come off the 1st of July, and it's Ridgetown. They have till that mid-November for crops to grow. So 6 out of 8 years, they were able to grow cover crops and manage them accordingly. And after 8 years with 6 cover crops in that cycle, they saw some yield improvement.
Okay.
When we look at it in a field crop rotation, we have struggled to find real yield improvement, unless the cover crop is red clover. That one's solid. Red clover works. I think oats can work if they're managed well, but I'm spraying my oats in the fall. I'm not taking a program dollar because I want my oats dead in the fall. Late fall, but dead.
Hey, make sure, everybody, that you check out We Pete's Word. New episode drops every single Wednesday where Pete answers your agronomic questions. Fantastic podcast. Hey, Pete, have yourself a great week. Thanks for joining us here today on RealAg Radio.
Yeah, super. Thanks for having me, Shaun. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, everybody, if you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Remember, no agronomists tonight. We're taking just a pass this week. We'll be back next week, we promise. Okay, thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we will chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everyone.
Get flexible farm financing with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Save on interest costs and sell when the time and price are best for you. Visit ccga.ca to learn more. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advanced Payments Program.